Sue, this is a tester. Can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. And Nick, can you hear us?
Certainly can.
All right.
It is 7. And this evening, we knew that Donna was not able to attend. And the rest of us are here, so we can get started. This feels very loud. We're good?
Michael made a special request to have us be a little bit extra loud tonight.
Okay, good, perfect.
Right?
I wasn't listening, sorry.
I think she's saying, oh, you too,
Case in point.
selective. I'm apparently on page 562 of the packet, which is not helpful. Okay. So are we recording? Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone. So, in case of emergency, you can leave out of the back of the room, out of either door and go either direction down the hallway. Do we have any agenda changes? Okay, open to the public for items not related to the agenda. Does anyone have anything? Nick? Are you? I guess
I'm
you're not technically the public, so never mind.
I'm just here to talk about anything TDM or EV charging should it come up.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then let's move on before we get waylaid. Any announcements from anyone?
Yes,
Yes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
And Michael, and then Helen?
there will be a memorial celebration for Sarah Dopp at the Land Trust's annual meeting. That will be the main purpose of the meeting. So it's on Friday evening at 5 o'clock at the Ridgewood Estates clubhouse, and all are welcome. We just need an RSVP from people who are going to attend. If any of you will, I've got a few already. But
This Friday.
beg your pardon?
This Friday?
Yes, Friday the 14th.
Helen?
I just wanted to mention, what I thought was a really interesting article from, I believe it was the New York Times, and I sent it to Kelsey and Paul, and just encourage you when and if they send it to you to read it. It was really fascinating about a US government program when Mitt Romney's dad was head of HUD, and they were working on building affordable housing, very affordable in a unique way. And it started out and they built some of it, and then no one wanted to fund it apparently. But the Japanese and the Swedes came over and looked at these things, and they have since incorporated some of these techniques in building eminently affordable housing in their countries. And I just thought it was just kind of interesting. Obviously, not obviously, it requires national what do you call it? Standards, which is very difficult, and probably national zoning to allow it too. So, but you could probably do it on a state level. And then additionally to that, I serve on the airport commission, and in our process of building the new North End terminal, the other day we went through accepting, or asking the Burlington City Council to allow us to apply for these grants. And there's an interesting company in New England that I meant to look up the name of it and I can't. But what they build are sustainable wooden beams that replace steel beams.
Yep.
And they're just as strong, apparently. They're, very green oriented, and they're a little more expensive. And the airport is asking for a special grant so we can work with them. It's like the Northeast Wood something or other. But I thought that was pretty interesting, because it's sourced, even though the lumber is from Alaska and it's shipped somewhere in the Northeast where they build these things, it's still cheaper than the iron or the steel. So it's something to think about, and I thought those two things are kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
I think it's mostly laminated and resin impregnated structural beams. My father used them years and years ago for big spans, roof spans, and particularly those that needed shape.
Oh, right. Well, the airport's using it on a third floor, or hoping to, a third story.
No, it's great.
So I thought that was kind of cool and wanted to
Helen?
share that with you.
Yep, and that I did email around that article earlier today.
Okay, thank you. It's kind of long, but it's interesting.
Interesting, yeah, I read it.
I think it's kind of long anyway.
Other announcements from anyone? Okay, do we have any staff items?
Two quick things. One is that over the course of the winter, we've been working with the principal of the Marcotte School, as she and her team have been leading the students through a process of sort of a civics process of first naming the hallways inside the school and culminating in proposing names for you for the unnamed street immediately next to here. And they really built it into a whole civics program and understanding the significance of names and things like this. They named all the hallways, and they have narrowed it to a top 3 that the students are voting on this week, as to, what their rank choices are going to be for you all to consider. So sometime in the not too distant future, you're going to see their proposal. We're working with her about whether we're going to do it during the summer as an action, or possibly waiting until the end of the summer when the students are back, so that it can be done sort of as they get to interface with their planning commission. So, and then ultimately later, once it's selected, once you all hear from them, make your choice, and the sign is made, then there'll be a big unveiling event too. So it's really kind of a neat connection to the school that's right next to us, and a opportunity to learn a little bit about how you impact your community and history of your community and stuff like that. Second one, totally unrelated to South Burlington, but just along the lines of what Helen was just speaking about. There's been, as we know, a big push in Vermont around a lot of the housing work. I guess there's 2 things. One, the legislature last month, as you may know, passed the second phase of the Home Act that you've been working on amendments for. It's called the Be Home Act. We are still awaiting what the governor will do about it. So the governor's been working hard on all sorts of bills. We have not yet heard on this one, but we'll let you know as soon as we hear. There's not too many changes that directly affect local zoning. At least immediately. There's a few, and most of them are incorporated. There's a couple that it changes the way that DRB process works. So we'll just have to wait on that. There is significant changes to both Act 250 in terms of creating tiers of areas, as well as setting up the structure for reforming the designation program. So we're a new town center here. There's village programs, there's downtown programs. They were all made on their own over time, and so they're not a cohesive set. What's been approved by the legislature is basically a complete redo of those that makes them a cohesive set and encourages communities to go from one to the next to the next. So imagine that you were South Burlington, New Town Center, or let's say I think they'd call it a level 2 or something. And then it got built out in this form, and then you started put in some of the programs like a downtown organization and some of the other pieces. And once you have the other pieces, then you would be encouraged to then become what would now be considered a downtown, and you'd get additional benefits. So it's sort of reaching upwards, so which is kind of neat. So that was 2. And then the third one that is really unrelated to us, but just interesting, and that I was thinking about it when Helen was speaking, was the Canadian federal government has just rolled out a really fascinating program where they have made $5 billion available nationwide for municipalities to assist with housing, with the condition that fourplexes are allowed as of right. So it's an interesting sort of like we did with the seatbelt laws way back when here of you can get your federal aid money, but only if you allow seatbelts. It's sort of taking a federal approach to it. Just interesting to think about how different places are tackling the same set of problems. It is not universally agreed upon by the provinces and municipalities, but that's legislation.
Okay, so I think we can move on to item 5, which was the transportation demand management and level of service updates. And this spans information in both packets. So we got our initial packet, which had the full clean version and the red line version. And then we got a second packet that just had a small amount of additional information, just making the most up-to-date language. And this-
Yeah, so just for clarity, the original packet that you got included Articles 3 and 13, I believe, that had edits, 2, 3, and 13 that also included edits related to transportation. There were 2 additional sections that were only had edits related to transportation, not any of the other edits. And they were unintentionally omitted from that first packet. So that's what you received on Friday of last week, is those additional articles that don't have any other edits related to anything else we've been talking about for the last 3, 4, 5, however many months at this point. They only have transportation related edits. And I believe those are Articles 10 and Appendix B.
Yeah.
So just for clarity, it is in both packets, but that's why.
It still has electric vehicle changing instead of charging as a heading.
Oh, okay, we will correct that. So a little bit of table setting, and then I'm going to hand it over to Nick for any questions that you might have. So you talked a few months ago about the transportation demand management, and that is the program that's in there at the beginning of Article 13. And as discussed a few months ago and then laid out in the memo, it is a program that requires medium and larger developments, so 25 trips or more, being created to achieve through sort of this options table some level of reduction in vehicles. So if you're a medium-sized development, it is a 5% reduction, and if you're a larger one, you have to reduce your trips by 14%. So what it means functionally is there's a digital version of a big book that lays out a restaurant of a standard sit-down restaurant has X number of trips per 1,000 square feet, or a multifamily housing has a X number of trips. Comes in a table. It's a nationwide information based on surveys. And that's what we use, and that's what we historically have used for calculating the vehicle trips. This program, which you had first started to work on pre-pandemic, would require that either 5 or 14% of those mathematical trips be moved away from being vehicles using one or a combination of all those different tools in there. So putting covering over your bike racks, or having a connected, having your site amenity connected to a bus stop, or for larger ones, joining Catma or having a car share car on site. So that's the TDM program. We've been working through and making sure that that different types of projects can each achieve it, that it can be achieved by lots of different ways, because this is really supposed to be a menu of options, and Nick can speak to that a little more thoroughly. So that's the TDM. At the end of Article 13 is a replacement of your transportation standards. So, and also Article 10. Years ago, the city had identified that you've got this tool called the Traffic Overlay District. It is essentially a hard cap on the number of vehicle trips that can take place in the evening, unless you do a pretty substantial physical investment. We did a report, which I mentioned in there, the Cars to People project years ago, that had analyzed this and sort of identified that it had some benefits. It was a useful program when it existed, but the side effects of it have been to dampen investment in development along the Williston Road and the corridor and the Shelburne Road corridors, exactly where our form-based code and all your work along Shelburne Road have been encouraging, especially for things that are busy in the afternoon and evening. So one cause of the not seeing a lot of activity on parts of Williston Road, including, let's say, the vacant lot where the old video store used to be at the corner of Heinsberg Road and Williston Road, is this hard cap is a really difficult thing to change, is to overcome. And so the proposal that we had talked about, and this includes in it, is to eliminate that in its entirety. So that's gone. There is no more hard cap. Instead, the combination of the transportation demand management and a updated, more modern version of looking at how we measure traffic citywide and make sure that we are being thoughtful to the needs of both the city and the development is replacing it. And so level of service, transportation is measured by typically letter grades of service. So it goes A through F, think of it like a report card, although your ideal isn't necessarily an A. An A would be like I-91. There is nobody on it. So you've essentially overbuilt the road. C is things are moving along really well. D says you're starting to get some backups at various points. And then F and E are, it really gets E and F get much slower. D and E are sort of where you typically want to see downtowns be, because if a downtown is free flowing traffic, that means there's not a lot of activity in that downtown. That's sort of, Detroit in the 70s and 80s, post losing so much of Detroit. And so this standard would move us to having our core areas allowing level of service E, so a little bit more congestion, therefore encouraging more activity to be on foot, which is part of what you're trying to do in a downtown. And elsewhere in the city, keeping the level of service D, and having more clear standards about when a traffic study is required for the DRB. So that's kind of the summary of it. There was for those of you who are on the commission a couple of years ago, there was a more involved version of it that we felt was had too much complexity. And so this is a little bit slimmed down on that. So Nick, what did I miss? And then happy to open it up for discussions and questions.
I don't think you missed much, except to you didn't mention the traffic overlay district that is being removed along with the citywide level of service, which is being divided into tiers.
Okay.
Where's the listing of the D versus E service levels? Is that, I just wanted to see like
Yep.
which is in which.
That is at the end of 13, and I can pull it up.
And then I just wanted to look at that, what the breakdown was. And then any questions?
Actually, I do have a quick question. So the overlay district previously had what, like our major corridors, Wilson Road, Sheldon Road, Hinesburg Road, Kennedy Drive.
Basically, yeah, those are the places, yeah.
So those areas, that's where the TMD, whatever that we talking about here. XYZ. That's where that's mainly going to be used. With the rest of the city, how does that play out?
So the areas that were the traffic overlay district become the places where we allow, where we're in the draft, the level of service is allowed to be E, so a little bit more congestion is allowed. The transportation demand management applies citywide. So it's, but it only applies to
Projects over a certain.
projects over a certain amount of trips and only development that is required a site plan. And so no single family homes, no duplexes, no 3 or 4plexes as proposed, because frankly, it's very hard to come up with solutions to move people out of cars in single family homes. They already have the ability to have a charger. They already have the ability to have a bike stored. They have obviously a shower because they live there. So we didn't want this to feel like something sort of fake in single family home settings. So it applies to multifamily homes where there may not always have been sufficient things like bike parking being installed, or they could put in a car share like Cambrian Rise has done, and non-residential.
So would something like South Village, I know that's pre-existing, but would they have had to use?
Yes, so what they would need to do in that circumstance is they would need to figure out the number of units that are not in single and 2-family homes. And then if the trips coming from the rest of that were more than 25, which there likely would, then they would need to pick from this menu and find some things that are appropriate to that setting. And so in their case, they would likely do something like either covered bike parking for guests for the short-term bike parking, or they might have more space to have bikes have EV charger, electric bike charging, because those are you can't just hang them on a rack. Or if they were a little bigger, they might work with Car Share Vermont and have a car share site up there.
Okay.
And sorry that I jumped in there, Nick, when I think that question might have been sent to you.
Well, that's quite all right. Thank you, Paul. As you can see, my cat Alote has decided to join me, so he's going to be jumping in and out a bunch, I assume. So I think one thing though that is important to note that there is a difference between the traffic study requirement, which kicks in at 75 forecast trips, and the TDM. TDM has its own separate trigger that has to do with 75 trips. We've tried to align that specifically. But a place like South Village being proposed from scratch would undergo traffic study. And that may involve changes to the roadway or other investment in civil infrastructure. But it wouldn't be, the individual homes wouldn't be subject to TDM, which is the mechanism by which we require that developers mitigate trips. And again, that's intended to target multifamily, commercial, sort of concentrated operations where you can achieve an economy of scale when it comes to vehicle trips and non-vehicle trips.
So Jessica, you had asked for what is the area? So the tier 1 basically is described as Williston Road, Shelburne Road, and the neighborhood development area, which is our core city center area.
Where's that defined? It's actually not defined anywhere else in the packet, at least. If you
Sorry,
just
the
search for neighborhood development area, the only place that shows up is within this section.
Good
on
point.
TDM.
We can define that as being the designation. We'll put a definition in
Okay.
for it. That's a good point.
That's it.
And then the other half of what you're asking about, Jessica, is this is where this would say what that level of service becomes.
Any other questions or comments on this? Go ahead, Fred.
So the map goes away? Does that map go away?
So the map of the traffic overlay district would
Yep.
go away. We had planned to include the description of the two tiers in text, but if the commission would prefer that that is shown, it's also easily mapped. So I guess that's really a style question for you all. If you think it would be more transparent to map it, it doesn't take us much effort to map it. So either way with that really, but as drafted, it's just described in text here.
Did Fran say map the tier 1 and tier 2? Is that
So
what
he asked whether the map of the traffic overlay district was going away and just that component of the map, yes.
Does anybody want to see it mapped? I mean, other than, I just want to make sure we know what the neighborhood development area is, if that's somewhere, but then I don't know that we need to map it separate necessarily. Anything else, or should we move on to the next item?
The only other thing that I think we wanted to highlight super quickly was in the additional packet that you got where it had Appendix B, there's a line in there. You had asked a few months ago to make sure that one of the challenges that we identified months ago was really small developments that like a small business that wants to expand currently has to go and do a traffic study or do a traffic analysis, hiring an engineer to review the manual, and then they almost always come back and they say, well, sorry, you're so small that you don't fall into the manual, which means that the regulations mean that you have to go study 4 other sites, and it becomes this very expensive process. And you had asked for us to come up with a simpler solution. So Nick worked with our consultant, John Slayson from RSG, who has proposed that for developments, changes of use within existing buildings of 5,000 square feet or less, that it is just a set number. So as somebody who comes in and says, oh, I was a restaurant and now I want to be a clothing store, or vice versa, it's just a flat number. Everything is simple. It takes 10 minutes instead of charging them $1,500 to do an analysis. So I think we felt really good that we've simplified things for small businesses in our area to just allow them to do changes or little additions to their building without having to go through a lot of rigmarole.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 6. LDR updates, full language review. Crazy.
Yeah, so
and
just to
here-
frame this a tiny bit, there's 2 kind of parts to this. The first is actually reviewing language, asking any questions, having any discussions that you want to have amongst yourselves, anything else related to language. The second is we have a proposed, the planning commission has to submit reports on these amendments when they're warned for public hearing, or when they go to public hearing. There are so many things that are changing, and they're little bits and pieces all over the place. We have structured a way to break them out into 10 sort of bylaw amendments that are kind of categories that catch all the little bits and pieces that have moved around. So the second piece of this discussion is I have here, because I wasn't sure how the AV was going to be working, some handouts of little short descriptions of those 10 proposed, the way we propose to slice up the amendments into 10 understandable sections. So I can pass that out after you work through whatever you'd like to work through on the language, just flagging for you that there's kind of these two discussions as part of this agenda item.
Okay. Any, so I don't think we need to go through section by section necessarily, but I think that if people have things they want to bring up, we can just kind
Yeah.
of jump to those where they are.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Okay. You want to get started?
On page 13 under affordable housing, we've added the word targets in A and B. And I think that changes in the definitions,
Hmm.
page 13.
Got it.
I think targets changes the meaning, but before without the words target, there was a finite
Are you in the
number.
definitions, Michael?
Beg your pardon?
Are you in the definition? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
page, affordable housing, either A or B. And I think that changed the meaning of the MSA, which is a finite number. It's superfluous as well. I think we should strike the words targets in those two paragraphs.
Michael, I'm just taking a quick look to see, I have a feeling that might come from the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Let me take a look
Okay.
while you're looking at that.
Not there.
But it doesn't appear in chapter 18.
Yeah.
Definition.
All right, well, I can go on then on page 39.
Which one is it going? Here.
These two paragraphs, the word.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Under affordable housing.
Yes.
Okay.
We define the plan as a municipal development plan. But it's much more than a development plan. And it's elsewhere referred to as a municipal plan or a
Sorry, what page? is it on,
city
Mike?
plan.
39, it's still in definitions. It's the definition of plan.
Oh, okay. That was not a definition that we changed in this draft, but
I think we should.
proposed change.
I mean, we should pick one of them for consistency throughout this. Either it's a municipal plan or a city plan or a municipal city plan.
So Michael, to your first one, if the rest of the commission would like to get rid of the word targets, that's fine. It's not referenced in the table that I thought it was being referenced in. The reason it appeared was that there were two different definitions for affordable housing. One was in Article 19, one was in Article 2, and I was mashing them up. If the rest of the commission would like to get rid of the word targets, that's perfectly fine with me. So if you got some
Madam
hands,
Chair?
then
So
fine
where,
with me.
finally found it. So where exactly, is it in A or B?
Both.
It's
in
Is it
both.
both?
It's the second to last line of,
Oh, target, okay, income, okay,
And the other one's down here.
okay.
yeah, so
I don't need the word targets there. I mean, it wasn't there before with all the reviews we've had for affordable housing in the past. Or
So
people
just take out the
gen-
word target and
Yeah.
just say the
Yeah.
80%, which is defined.
Okay, is that generally okay? Because people
Fine.
are seeing some head nodding, so we'll remove targets. Okay, so
We have the bullseye.
on plan definition,
And-
go on with what you were saying.
It was,
about it.
it's a similar thing. Take out the word development. A municipal plan, that's much more than a development plan in our case. I don't know about other towns, but our plan is much more than development. I think it gives the wrong idea. It's a much broader and all encompassing document. So I would say let's leave out the word development as a second comment. Yes,
Michael, the reason it's in there is I agree with you philosophically, and the reason it's in there is because under state statute, it is called the municipal development plan. So
Uh-huh.
this is trying to make sure that we are being clear that this is the plan referenced in statute.
then we should use that terminology throughout whenever we refer to the plan, because that's the definition.
So the point of having a definition at the beginning is that we don't have to use that throughout. The word plan, when used throughout, is defined as being the municipal development plan under state statute.
No, but we use city plan in a lot of places.
Mhm.
And we use municipal plan in other places without the word development. So we should pick one.
So I would suggest that we
Should pick the statutory one.
Oh. Must be,
Yeah.
I don't know if we want the word development all
Right,
over
that's-
the place, because I think I agree with you. We don't want to be using that word development everywhere. Are you just saying we should just use the word plan without any other qualifiers?
Well, if we're going to define it, my original view was we should delete the word development because it's the city plan is a lot more, but Paul has
So-
pointed out that's the definition in the statute.
So what I would suggest is actually adding comma city to that definition, plan comma city, which is kind of a unfortunate definitional reversal thing, but then it is clear that everywhere that says city plan, which is what we've been writing city plan 2024 or subsequent city plan, et cetera, it would refer to the definition that defines it as the state statute term, municipal development plan. That prevents repeating municipal development plan throughout and using the word development over and over again. It's also more specific that it's pointing to the actual name of the document that was passed by city council in January.
So the definition of plan would say municipal development plan, comma,
No,
city
the
plan?
term would be
Plan,
plan,
comma, city.
comma, city.
Oh, in the highlight.
The name of the term itself would be city plan.
Comma, city.
Right.
Yep.
And if we find anywhere in the LDR, Michael, where you said it referred to a municipal plan, we'll change that to city plan.
Yeah, there's definitely, it is actually pretty likely that there are places in the LDRs that say municipal plan or comprehensive plan in areas that I didn't comb through for specific review.
Forgive me for combing through, but yes, that's fine. City plan everywhere else.
Yep.
I had a question on page 102.
Does that move out of definitions?
Beg your pardon?
Yes,
Yes.
that's in Article 9.
I've got one on definitions.
Okay,
The
let's
one
go
is-
with that.
So, excuse me, further down, under the word, inclusionary,
Mhm.
we refer to, we say, it refers to of the section affordable dwelling unit, but it's really, we just talked about it, that section's really affordable housing. So if you move back up,
Back up to where it's on the screen there. Yep.
no, it's not there. So let me get to that. So it's under, it's inclusionary.
So inclusionary now refers to affordable housing.
Right, so on page
Yes.
29 of the packet, the definition for inclusionary unit says see affordable dwelling unit, and there is
Right.
no definition for affordable dwelling
It's
unit.
affordable housing.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So
We
we
can
have,
point to,
Good job.
okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on definitions while we're still there? Okay, Michael, your next one?
page 102, under the subheading B residential development allowance. Item 1 says containing, more than one principal structure containing 1 or 2 units only where. And then the portion under A, shouldn't the A have the same, instead of just a single family dwelling, shouldn't it have the same conditions as in 1? containing 1 or 2 units. The portion of, that reads the portion of the lot in any non-NRP district is insufficient to accommodate the construction and use of, and then you've got a single family dwelling, whereas in one above, you've got 1 or 2 units, not restricted to a single family. Got it.
Let me
Yep.
just make sure I'm following the right spot here. Where are we?
We're right here.
Or page
One
10,
BA.
page 102, under residential development allowance, section 1.
Yep.
Where the lot
Didn't-
is.
it didn't change.
15.
Oh,
One or two
okay.
and didn't say two.
So my note says, should it read single family or 2 family dwelling
Sure.
unit as in as above?
Sure, I would say under state statute, they have to be regulated to the same dimensional standards, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm happy to add single family dwelling unit or
I'm not here to make you
Duplex.
happy.
duplex.
Okay.
I'm here just the opposite.
Well, let's add the duplex just to make sure we're not missing it.
So is that in B1?
Yes, B1A.
B1 little a, add
Use-
duplex.
Of a single family dwelling unit and a duplex? Or a duplex and compliance?
Or. Okay,
And then
great.
same next paragraph under 2, we changed something from 3 principal buildings containing 6 dwelling units from what it was before 3. Is that because of something that I'm not seeing here?
So this was a tricky section to write, Michael. So previously, the standard said 3 single family homes were allowed on 3 lots in the NRP.
Yep.
The Planning Commission changed that a couple of years ago to say 3 units, period, i.e. you could build a triplex instead of 3 single family homes. Since it says that you can have 3 lots, which is in keeping, and under statute now, everything that's a single family can be a 2 family, 3 lots become 6 units. And so we could have said no more than 3 duplexes if you choose, but that precludes somebody from building 2 triplexes instead, which takes up less space.
So this
it's-
could be
it's a-
3
it-
lots with 2 each?
Right,
meaning-
you could say 3 lots with no more than 2 each.
Unless you wanted to do 2 lots with 3 and none.
Right, and that's how we got into this. How do we write this? It's a little bit tricky.
Not to exceed 6 dwelling units would have been, I would have understood it more than. But that's containing up to means not more than.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Do you do 1 duplex and 1 quad? No. I mean, that makes 6 units.
Yeah, so
Right.
you could do that too. Yes.
So that's, yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
6 is,
Yeah, I mean, an owner could say, I'm only going to take 2 lots, not 3, and then make them with 3 on each.
Right, so you could go back to saying no more than 3 lots, each containing a single or duplex. But in Helen's example, you might take up less space in the NRP by allowing a duplex and a fourplex. So
Yep.
we were trying to sort of balance out the sort of trickiness of the new law, which does allow for more housing, but not necessarily create more land dedicated to.
But yeah, so a landowner could say, I'm only going to ask for 1 lot subdivision and I'm gonna put 2 triplexes in there.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. General standard, page 106. That just came to, under the general standards, item 1. It's something that referred back, but I think it's gone. We talked about habitat blocks having picnic tables and and such like, but I think that's out. So, but the reason I raised it last time was because of this, that all lands within a habitat block must be left in an undisturbed, naturally vegetated condition. So we're okay there.
So just a little bit of additional information on that. We did speak with the city legal team and had a bit of back and forth about the legal benefits, the sort of the pros and cons on the legal side. There isn't a clear answer on that previous provision. It had been suggested to us by outside counsel, but with the lay of the land sort of with takings law, the where we landed was the additional protection that adding something like that into the LDRs would give the city. First of all, didn't make anything bulletproof, and second of all, was pretty minimal, actually. So the proposed incursion into the habitat block maybe wasn't worth the potential legal protection that it would provide in a litigation case.
Yeah, because we, somewhere in, I'm not quite sure where it is, we have a definition of unpaved, non-motorized trail,
Right.
at least 10 feet wide, that would be allowed in a habitat block. Isn't that correct? I'm
It's
not
in the
sure which
next-
section
It's
it's in.
immediately below. It's in 2 exempted uses and
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah, so, which is what's basically the facts on the ground are pretty much.
So following commission direction at the last meeting, that was taken, the picnic table part was taken out.
Yep.
Yep, so that's gone.
Okay. And just a note, the last item is on page, not that you don't have to go there, but on page 210 on the general PUD. Zoning districts include IA, but there's a note that says use is allowed only as an educational support facility. Section 701E. So it is restricted by note 11 in the table. I don't know whether you want to add something about that right there.
Sorry, Mike, I am not following. There's something in the use table or
Yeah.
in,
In the use table, yes.
okay.
In the notes at the end,
Mm-hmm.
note 11 applies to institutional agricultural.
Is it really on page 210 where you say in your note here?
Uh,
No, I think, because you say,
general PUD, dimensional standards allowed. Applicability, I'll find it in a minute. You know what? It's on page 211. Yeah, one on page 211. I'll find it. Housing mix, civic spaces, streets. It's dimensional standards, compatibility, applicability.
So Michael, I think that is actually not, it's in the current table of uses, the appendix C, that the list of all those, the footnotes. So footnote 11 says uses allowed only as an educational support facility. See section 701E.
Yep.
Now I'm trying to find note 11 above.
So just so I understand, so for new PUDs in zoning districts, institutional agricultural,
Mhm.
that use is the note 11 use is allowed only for an educational support facility. I don't know whether we need to note it in that section.
So while Kelsey's looking it up, just so that for the rest of the commission, the way that the institutional agricultural district works is that the primary use that's allowed is a higher education facility. And then there's a second use called an educational support facility. And that has a whole list of things that would appear to be other things like a retailer or a restaurant or a copy printing facility or something like that, that are sort of ancillary to existing at a university. So in the Davis Center, there is a food provider. That doesn't make them a restaurant per se. It is, part of the educational institution. So those are all called educational support, as long as they are being hosted sort of within the campus as a campus thing. UVM can't go and take one of these lands and pop a McDonald's up, a mile from the rest of their campus. That's not an educational support facility. But if there was a McDonald's within the Davis Center, then that's supporting the campus function. Does that make sense?
It's 210, it's page 210.
So
So Michael, I'm not following the connection between the PUD section and the footnote 11. The PUD section applicability is just saying that you can have a general PUD as a new, if you have a new PUD, you can have a general PUD in IA and air. That's just sort of the framework of subdivision review. It doesn't govern what uses are allowed in that PUD. So I'm not sure.
So a general PUD could be student housing, for example. Could it?
a general PUD would is a process that for how a project is reviewed. The allowed uses are only the allowed uses in the underlying zoning district. So if the zoning district, say IA, allows for education, then that's what's allowed.
Mhm.
If the IA doesn't allow for medical office, I'll just pick something random, then it would not be allowed in the general PUD. The general PUD is really just a process of review,
Yeah.
not a,
It's not a use. A
Mm.
PUD is not. a
Okay,
separate
no, I
use.
would have said, I'm satisfied with that, but I would have said, see note 11 on appendix C1, C2. But leave it. If it's clear.
Right.
That's all.
Other people have other things?
Yeah, a couple.
Go ahead, Fran.
Uh, I think I sent Kelsey a note on, Article 4.01B1.
bring the mic a little bit closer.
Sorry, 4.01B1 and 4.02B1. They seem to be crossed. One is LSN and one is MS.
I'm seeing a typo in 402B1. It should say MSN instead of LSN.
Right.
But I don't see anything wrong with 401B1 because it does say LSN. Am I following what you're
Yeah,
saying?
let me double check because
Okay,
I didn't
yeah.
go to the page.
So that's on page 88 of the packet. 88 and 89. Oh, I think, or 87 and 88. No, 88, 89.
Where my cursor is circling here.
Yeah.
This is in reference to the MSN district, the medium scale neighborhood. But it's cross-referencing the wrong title there.
Yep.
And then, Fran, your other one was up above, and in this one, I think it is
Does say
correct.
LSN.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's intentionally the same provision, but you're correct that I copy pasted and you caught me.
And the next one I had was 1404. 2. Limitations. I don't know what page. I'll have to get to it.
143.
And I didn't think that the wording seemed to restrict anything.
1404. What did you say, Fran?
2 limitations, sub two. Or
The letter. Oh,
I.
yeah, no, you don't. Yeah.
Two.
You're speaking about limitations.
So I
It
think it's the
doesn't, the
phrase
way
that-
it reads doesn't seem to be, it limit anything.
I think it should say, exceeding the applicable lot coverage and or
Oh, yeah.
building coverage maximums allowed within each zoning district. Is that what you mean? Like shall not permit exceeding those numbers? I'm missing a verb.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Exceeding or above or something like that, yeah. So what it's supposed to be saying is the board in a site plan does not have the ability to allow more lot coverage than what the regulations say unless they're buying TDRs. They can't just sign a waiver and say you get 80% coverage instead of 70%.
mhm. And I think, as I said before, to be totally clear, the numbers will be fixed. All of the
Yeah.
outline numbers are not correct.
And
All
what
right.
page is that? I'm taking.
That's on
like
one
a-
43 of the packet. 144, sorry.
144.
Looks like Fran's still working. I have a question on 315, and this, I don't know that this is something we're changing. It's about the size.
3.15,
315,
page 315.
page 315. It's about the accessory dwelling units, and I actually think this might be the same size we have always had, but it says the ADU must not exceed 600 square feet gross floor area. That seems kind of smallish.
should
Is
be
that a
900.
problem? I mean, I guess I just wasn't sure. It shows up somewhere later in a different section too.
So the way that it's written right now, and you're more than welcome to change it, is and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the statute said the state
Did we have a percentage not to exceed?
right,
it?
so the state law says that a municipality must allow 30% or 900 square feet, whichever is greater. And that's written into 2 right here. The provision that Jessica is referring to is if somebody is proposing to put an accessory dwelling unit within the setback. So because an accessory structure can typically be 5 feet from a property line, whereas a principal structure has to be further away, we get a fair number of conversions of, say, things like garages. So if you're choosing to put an accessory dwelling unit within the side or rear setback, then you've got the smaller limitation of only 600 square feet and only 15 feet in height, so that it's not looming over your neighbor. So you do have the 900 square feet or 30% if you're meeting any of the standards applicable to a single family home. This is above and beyond the minimums of the law, because the law doesn't say you have to allow accessory dwelling units at all in the setbacks. So this is just trying to create an allowance without having bigger homes looming over their neighbors 5 feet from the property line.
Yeah, it's great.
And I don't think that's new, it's just moved.
Yeah, and that's a great description. 515, page 515 in the packet, that's the red line version. It's talking about the TND characteristics. And there's a few of these that are just crossed out. It doesn't, it's right in B, the description. Like that one, like about the amenities, like why is the amenities crossed out? Are we no longer having amenities, or is this because it got switched up into all site plans?
No, so this is some of these, and I'd have to really look at them exactly. This is a list of the characteristics of a TND. It is not the list of any requirements in the TND. So some of these were listed as characteristics but they're also mirroring like very specific standards. So it didn't make a lot of sense to say something like efficient, highly interconnected local street and path network, et cetera, which is like an umbrella principle of a TND, and have something very specific that is otherwise dealt with in later standards. So this is, some of these were victims of making the language a little more concise when the standard is dealt with elsewhere.
Yeah, we were just being wordy. Okay, so just a little bit after that, on page 520, there's the TND subzones, and specifically in this neighborhood center, which, you know, I guess I pictured as being kind of like the middle of the TND. We had under 4AI sub I, there was that whole piece about the infill PUD or TND, which is the smaller one, could have maybe a lower density, and you crossed it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it used to be able to have the 4 dwelling units per acre in the middle. Is that, I mean, that small TND is pretty small
I think that's removed.
totally, or it's 520?
Oh, 520.
520.
Jessica, I think that's removed because a TND must be 4 units an acre minimum as a baseline. And so I think it looked as though it was redundant to say that
Oh, I see what you're saying. It seems silly. There is no core. There is no neighborhood center in
or if
required.
it's less than 10 acres, the minimum of a TND is always 4. So to say it again was repetitive, I think.
Yeah, I'm
Is
okay
that-
with that. I just wanted to
okay.
make sure I understood what was going on there. I didn't have any other questions. I don't know if others do.
Anybody else?
I have one on the subject of TND when you're all done. That I think is sort of a big picture question that we wanted to chat with you about, but you all go through your list first.
Any other items specific, or should we have Paul describe what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we've been doing sort of the scrubbing and the pushing and pulling of all this, and we identified something that might be that you might want to adjust a little bit, and that's where PUDs are required, and specifically where a traditional neighborhood is required. So under the regulations before these ones, the ones that are currently in effect, some parts of the city are required to be either a conservation PUD or a TND. And in some cases, they are required to be a conservation PUD, and within that, they can have a TND if they have enough space. We were thinking this through, and with the removal of the conservation PUD, the standard now becomes that in the low scale neighborhood districts, which are the former R4s and the SEQ ones, and in the former R1s and R2s, if you have more than 10 acres, you're required to be a TND. And
You have more than 10.
if you have 10 acres in the draft.
Okay.
And the result of that is that there are some places in the city where somebody previously might have chosen to be a conservation PUD, put a handful of dwelling units in one part of the property, and then have a TND for the remainder. An example of that would be, for example, the Allenwood estate, where they were proposing to do a conservation PUD, have 3 larger lots, and then a TND. If the requirement under the draft regulation is that it be that it be a TND, then they are a property like them are sort of forced into one of 2 options. Either A, you have the whole thing be a traditional neighborhood except the wetlands and the habitat block, which is maybe in their instance substantially more than they were looking to do. Or they permanently conserve anything that's not or at least they conserve for at least the life of their master plan, anything that's not the TND, and so they can't do any, they choose a small area to build really compactly, and they have no ability to build some medium-sized lots. So this is a little bit of a side effect of having only the TND available and then making it mandatory. I'm not sure I said that as clearly as I rehearsed it earlier today. So, previously, somebody had a little bit more flexibility within if they chose to be a conservation PUD within the development portion of it, they could pick to be either a TND or the standards of a conservation PUD, or mix and match a little bit and balance it out so that they met their minimum of 4 units an acre. Without that piece in place, they either can do no development or they must be a full TND, which is a very compact development proposal. So we were thinking that you might want to adjust it, and for the low scale neighborhoods, say that a TND is optional. They can still take advantage of it, they can still make use of it, but if it's not required, then they can choose to have some of it be a TND. Let's say they had 30 acres, they could make 10 of it a TND and 20 of it not build on, or 10 of it be a TND and 20 of it build something that was more medium scale if they chose to. The downside of that is that you may not get entirely compact development. On the other hand, it's a balancing of tools here. We
Right, I
may in
think-
other cases see that folks choose not to do anything at all
I think
because
that's what yeah.
they say, I wasn't prepared to do something on all of my land, so I'm just going to do nothing, and then we don't get the housing at all. So it's a tricky balance.
Right, and I think an important part of the making it optional is the not yes or no choosing to do all your buildable area as a TND. You could choose to do part, which you mentioned. Like making it optional is not just I'm going to do it or not do it. There's sort of these shades in between, where if you make it mandatory, they would have to take all of their buildable area and meet the TND standards in every scrap of buildable area on the property.
And then third option for you is if you wanted to warn it as it is, and then wanted us to write this down and have you think about it, you have time to think about it, ask us what questions are, have us map it for you. That's something that we were doing some scrutiny on it yesterday, and we're sort of looking to see what did we miss. And this is one that we thought, boy, this is really a commission discussion. So don't feel that you need to give us something on the fly right now. If you're not ready and you want some analysis, you could choose to warn it as is, and then anything other than that is less than, and so certainly would be a change you could make.
I would prefer to go that route and have you write up all the pros and cons of, I mean, we did the TND because we wanted compact and very efficient use of land. Making it optional, I don't know what we're giving up. So I would rather warn it now and then get some analysis, pros and cons from you.
I agree.
Yeah.
I just said one. So where would they make the choices? Would that be under master plan?
As drafted,
No.
or it
in
would
the-
be at master plan that they would say, what are we proposing to do? Yeah.
With those shift things. around.
Yeah. Just as today, they could propose to say our master plan is 40 acres in size, 30 of it we are planning to build on, 10 of it we have no plans to build on. The DRB in that instance would most likely say, well, that's fine, but as a condition of your approval, you can't come in to amend to bring those 10 acres in for the next 10 years, because the whole point of a master plan is
Right.
thinking everything out. We don't want, 6 amendments where they keep adding an acre at a time because that's undoes the entire purpose.
Right.
But that would be their other choice that they could do. Right.
It seems.
So are we ready for a motion?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
All right, shall I do?
Yeah, let's do
Okay.
it.
I move to move the LDR amendments as discussed, with discussed edits for a public hearing on July the 9th,
Sorry, Michael, that
2024.
with the holidays in July and the various notice schedules and the moving of planning commission meetings, that actually the public hearing has to be scheduled for July 30th. The second meeting in July, not the first.
July 30th. All right. I'll start over. I move to move the LDR amendments with discussed edits for public hearing on July the 30th, 2024.
Second that.
At 7 p.m. Is that a friendly amendment?
Hmm.
At 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m.
Great.
Okay, do we, I guess just as a question here, what's the situation with the report? Don't we need to have the report as part of this?
Yeah, so
motion?
technically the report does not have to go with the warning of the hearing. It has to be available by the time of the public hearing. Our intention is that you would have your the reports for the next planning commission meeting. And alongside the reports, we would also have materials assembled and written for public outreach purposes that are along the same lines as the report. So the reports are very prescribed by state statute. And you answer certain questions that the state asks. We'd be taking a lot of the same information, translating it into the public outreach materials. So you would have all of those things at the June 25th meeting, which is it's over a month ahead of the scheduled public hearing on July 30th.
Okay, and the report, what date did you say the report needs to be done? I'm sorry, I just want to write that
The
down.
report needs to be included in the notice that goes to the adjacent towns, so at
Right.
least
Oh, okay.
15 days in advance of the hearing.
15 days in advance.
So our thinking here was this gives an opportunity both for you to read the reports independently of the 500 pages that you saw today. And also you and the council have both given us guidance that you want to see you want to have materials available to the public that makes this all accessible.
Yeah.
So this gives us about a week or so of developing the packet and a few days after that for the public outreach materials to make sure that there are thoughtful outreach materials that are accessible, that the public has for a full month.
And that are available at the time that the other paper notice comes out.
Right, not.
So
a
if someone
week or
sees it
two
in the
after
other
that.
paper, they can go to the city website and our outreach materials are all written and posted and available, as opposed to being a week or two after that notice goes in the paper.
Okay, that sounds good. So, I'm sorry, I had a really long day today. Sorry for all these questions. Did your motion include the 6 items that we kind of did the head nodding about changing?
The 6 items that-
We had 6 items I wrote down that we were gonna change in the text, plus there might be some numbering changes, does his
Definite numbering
motion,
changes, yeah.
does his motion cover that?
It did not, but it could be a friendly amendment.
Okay, let's make sure to do that. Are you,
He did say with proposed amendments,
Oh, he did, okay.
with
Yeah, I thought-
proposed edits.
okay,
Yeah.
that was part of it?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was his
Good.
intent. on it.
So he did say.
perfect. Okay, any other discussion on the motion? Now that I'm clear. Anything from anyone else? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are unanimously sending it to, public hearing for July 30.
Can I take a moment and just say, I know that this is not the same action as actually voting them out, but congratulations to all of you for reaching this point. This is a huge amount of work. And I just want to say, thank you on behalf of myself and everybody for all the hard work that you've done to get to this point.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Just-
that should get echoed back to
Well, I said you all and Kelsey.
Kelsey.
Every couple weeks.
It's
ago. Yeah,
a
it's
boomerang.
You look pretty good.
Yeah.
And Kelsey, I'm sorry to tell you, I didn't check the grammar.
Don't worry, there's still a
Take
public
three
hearing,
more-
Mike.
Take 3 more
No, you
meetings,
could do a
Michael.
grammar check on the clean copy, can't you?
Yeah, I'm gonna be combing through
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
for any other typos when I do the formatting
I-
changes and
I
all.
think
worried
I
about that.
assumed that was what you meant with your motion.
Right. So our July meetings are the 9th and the 30th now.
Yes,
Is that right? Okay.
that's correct. Yeah, there was discussion at the last meeting that the
Right, 'cause
23rd, there was 3 or 4 people
Yeah,
missing.
okay.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I got it.
Good.
Yeah. And I guess while we're talking meetings, our next meeting, June 25, Duncan and I are both missing, but I think everyone else was available.
Yep, so
June.
that meeting will be chaired by Paul Ingalls
Yes.
and everyone else needs to show up.
So if
My calendars.
I think we just said you're discussing the public outreach materials.
Public outreach materials, and the
as
reports.
part of, at least a part of the meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know if you, like, if I can pass those. Sure.
Making them in pairs.
Sorry, let me get back to our agenda here. Are we actually on to other businesses? Oh, no. We're doing this part.
I
even you.
with everybody.
You did too.
And that's what this is, the report
I
structure.
apologize, they're
Yeah.
not stapled.
Okay.
So what Paul and I just handed out is 10 proposed reports for us to put together by approximate topic area that seem to make some logical sense to us and also to hopefully the public.
Where's the file?
It's in the reports file. Okay. So the first 2 are the transportation related ones, EV charging that you talked about at a previous meeting. And then, so that's number 1. Number 2 is the TDM and level of service updates that Nick was talking about.
Yep.
Sorry?
When you say report, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure we're all on the same page with the thing you are referring to.
Right,
Are you
so-
talking about the very technical report
Yes.
related to the comp plan review?
So that's.
Or like
The intention is sort of a twofold thing. The state has requirements for what the municipality needs to report when a new bylaw amendment gets passed or new bylaws in any form. They've set up a new form that very specifically says like, what about this? What about this? Like, do you meet this part of state statute? How about this one? And so we write out all these paragraphs effectively and check a bunch of boxes to fill out those forms. What the paragraphs that are in here are sort of the truncated versions of what would be in the kind of general description of the amendment in that form. With the intention that we can take a lot of this language and hopefully with not a lot of editing, use it in public outreach. So it's both things in the planning commission reports that the state needs about all of the amendments, but also structuring how public outreach is
And-
sliced.
And just to add 2 more sentences to that, it is both required under the statute, but it's also the way through statute that you demonstrate that what you're doing is in line with state law and with your own plan.
Right.
It is your proof. So it is an important legal document. And then in terms of the outreach, this is the way that you can frame the topics. So how do you want to talk about this with the community? So you had talked with us a few months ago, for example, at the bottom of the first page, that you didn't really want to talk about, in this very technical way that lot sizes are replacing density. What you wanted to talk about was what is the result and the outcome in the historically single family neighborhoods.
yeah.
So it's being discussed as these are amendments related to low-scale neighborhood infill and thriving communities. That's the framing of the subject, so that when you talk with the public, when you hear from them, that's the way that you're talking about it. So that includes the lot sizes, the lot coverages, the allowance to have a small amount of neighborhood commercial in it, all those things that sort of affect that kind of neighborhood so that people feel that it's accessible and not a 500 and something page, very important, but not most exciting reading. And so this is sort of the big question for you tonight is, are we getting the framing right on these topics?
Yeah, because as you've all seen over the last months, there's probably thousands of small individual edits throughout this document, from single words to whole sections and everything else. And there's a lot of different ways you could kind of slice those up to explain them and to have a logical narrative about it. And this is what made most sense. Honestly, it made the most sense to me. But if the commission has other thoughts, we are definitely willing to re-examine how this is being structured. Right, so the first is EV charging. The second is the transportation related things, the TDM and the level of service updates. 3, 4, and 5 are actually fairly similar. And they actually, in the way that it's all set up, they will have a lot of the same information in them in the way that the reports are written, because things like doing minimum lot size by building type instead of units per acre density applies in all 3. But as Paul just mentioned, we're talking about the future of different types of areas in the city, sort of the low, medium, and high, which line up with those consolidated zoning districts. So it's in the areas that are in consolidated zoning district LSN, we're doing these things. In MSN, we're doing these things. In HSMU, we're doing these things, and this is why. So it's all, those are fairly similar to each other, just relating a little bit differently to some of the differences in those 3 areas and the scale.
And then the outreach materials might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Because for different ones, you produce different materials over the last few months. So you might have a map showing, for example, in the low scale neighborhoods, you had looked at a map showing the percentage of lots that are more than 10,000 square feet so that they could be subdivided. That would go in with those materials.
Yeah. Or when I showed sort of fake mock-ups of a lot, how you could set up a house and a driveway and another thing that meet the requirements. And if it's this many square feet or that many square feet, some of those sort of hypothetical lot pictures could go into the outreach materials for these.
Just make a comment for the outreach for those 3 items.
Yep.
That, in some ways, it seems to me, those 3 are part of a larger change, which is we've eliminated all sorts of zones and consolidated. So it might help in clarity to the public if it's a big subtopic, I don't know, reorganization of zoning or consolidation of zoning. And then you have these 3 distinct. So they understand we're going from however many we had to, at least around housing, to these 3. I don't know, that just is a public.
With like maybe a really strong point to the map then too,
Yeah,
maybe,
that
because
could
the map,
be- Does that
it almost seems like
make
there's
sense to the
4.
public? I think maybe the public can translate that better to what they know now. Or at least if they have some familiarity, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a T4. Oh, okay. Used to
Yeah.
be a T4, now or
Mhm.
wherever. Okay. That was just a thought.
A table, a simple table might work, which shows
Yep.
the old zones where they went.
We can do that.
I'll say for the statutory forms, it's hard to do something like
Oh,
that.
okay.
We used to be able to, because it wasn't sort of plugged into a PDF form.
I get that. I
So
guess
now
I
we
was
actually have to repeat the 3, but that's not what you're saying.
Interrupting that in terms of the
That's,
final.
yeah.
It's
that's-
a good point. So
outreach,
maybe
so-
for the outreach piece, it could be like the map and a table and like an overarching description of why, and then the 3.
The 3 things, what are the changes, so people can see.
Love it.
Okay.
I have a question unrelated to this, so I'll wait if.
Oh,
Okay.
Keep going through
Anything
that.
else related
Yes.
to this?
So I was just gonna walk through the rest of them. 6 is all of the work in Article 15, so sort of reorganization, streamlining, making the requirements for submissions and timing and what follows what, and all of these things make sense in 16, including updates to the master plan and procedural updates to the PUDs. 7 is, we talked a couple meetings ago, consolidating of similar commercial uses, generally updating the table of uses and consolidating the Air and Air 1 districts. I think, Helen, this is along similar lines where it's,
Right.
this is what's being consolidated, like this is what it used to be. This, these are two uses that are close to identical, so we're smushing them together, that kind of stuff. 8 is another sort of meaty one. That's conservation land use updates and transferable development rights. So that includes the removal of the conservation PUD, updating the TDR program, both of which to conform with the updates to the state statute, explaining just a little bit about that. And again, these are just the really short versions. There will be more information available. Pairing that work with the just noting the water and sewer service areas. That's not in the planning commission's hands, that's council's work, but just noting the relationship between them. The same with habitat blocks and a couple of zoning changes about changing Hubbard Park to the Park District and adjusting the NRP district to reflect actual development restrictions on the ground. Inclusionary zoning is number 9. It's just basically all the adjustments to inclusionary zoning to make it sort of mesh well with the state requirements and bonus system while maintaining South Burlington's sort of additional requirements that we have had that exceed the state's optional program. And then finally, 10 is a lot of minor and technical amendments, consolidating some definitions, updating references, changes, or complying with S100 and Act 47 that just required text changes, not actually a lot of policy discussion. It's just the state now requires, 1 instead of 1.5 or whatever it is. Those kinds of changes that are required by state statute, those are all in number 10. So 10 is a bit of a technical language catch-all for some of those little things that either the planning commission didn't have a lot of, or the city as a whole doesn't have control over because it's just has to comply with state statute, or the sort of trickle down of everything else means you have to clean up some stuff here and there. So that's my rundown.
I guess our big question is, did we get the framing right on these topics so far? We're going to work through, get this more and more into plain English, but did we hit the topics the way that you expected to hit the topics?
Anything to break out further? Anything that you think should be put together? I think my personal opinion, this is about as small as we can smush them. While keeping the forums, the reports actually making sense.
Looks good. Can't have been easy.
It's
I
a
think it
lot.
looks really
There's a
good.
lot of different ways to
Yeah, this is
put this in
lot
buckets for sure.
And, I mean, each bucket is pretty chubby, but, or big, but.
Yep.
To have the buckets is helpful.
Yeah, the intention is both for the planning commission reports and then for public outreach, that if someone is not going to read hundreds of pages of red line text, that they can read the descriptions of these 10 buckets and get the highlights and then ask further questions and everything else.
I must say, when I sat down with this packet, I got out my computer, which I don't typically do, and made comments directly in it, but I found it wasn't as daunting as I actually thought it was going to be. Like we'd really looked at a lot of this. I mean, I felt good when I actually got into the red line. It was actually more scary at our last meeting when I didn't have the red line.
Yeah.
And I know there were reasons for that. And we discussed it, but I was like, okay, this is doable. And I feel good that we got through it tonight. So thank you, everyone.
And I have to admit, I did not follow your instruction to go to the clean copy. I went to the red line first.
All right, that's fine.
I did red line.
That's why you had both. You can choose your own adventure in the back.
Michael, you said you had a totally different
Yes.
thing?
A question about in inclusionary zoning in the prior version, didn't we have the median income based on Chittenden County?
So the median income is in the prior version referred to work that the table and the work that the Vermont Housing Finance Agency puts together, which is for the Burlington, South Burlington Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is defined as being Chittenden and Grand Isle County
And Frank.
and Franklin and Franklin. So it's in the census, we all get grouped together as one area, and
So
that
is it essentially the same? Because I was wondering whether if it's changed, because I thought
it hasn't.
just
So it hasn't
Burlington-
changed. It's always
Burlington and South Burlington would be different. And
no. I think the reason it gets used this way is that this is the way that the Federal Housing and Urban Development HUD slices it, and they sort of look at catchment areas of where people typically live. And so when they direct their funding to groups like Cathedral Square or Champlain Housing Trust, that's the number they use, which allows us piggybacking on that, means that we're in sync with the way that the nonprofits and also the for-profits that might get federal grant money all sort of ties into the same definitions.
So it is
not
Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle counties with a 2020 census population of 225,000 people. So about a third of the state.
And I think that, as I recall,
for it.
that was one of the drivers in throwing in Franklin County. Because, I mean, all of us, when you think about Franklin County, it's very different than Chittenden County.
yeah, those would,
It's mostly
Bring down.
rural and farm. and,
Right,
you know,
which
the
the
makes
number.
city.
which
So-
makes the requirement for affordability on the development community a little bit of a lower.
it makes it more difficult for the developer though.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I
Conservative.
think that was the
Okay.
driving force by
Okay.
the feds,
Yes,
which,
I think that's right. I will just as a off comment, the difference in housing in Burlington, South Burlington, some of the core parts of Chittenden County is a lot higher than Franklin County, but somewhere further out like Jericho, like they're actually more, St. Albans and other areas of Franklin County have gone up
right. there.
more than places like Jericho or Richmond have. So there's some of the outlying areas of Chittenden County and the core of Franklin County have gotten closer together.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's not as disparate as it used to be.
So, you, presented these to us in groups, and it might be a good idea to group them for everyone, since that's the way you're explaining it.
And that's exactly our goal. So as far as the public will be able to access the full LDR, but it's really hard to say, here's 500 pages, go have fun. So this is the way we're proposing to have the public be able to talk about it. So the
Understand, but
feedback
what
that you might get will be along these themes.
But
Okay,
I think.
but I'm saying rather than having 10, you might have, you had about 4 or 5, really.
Well, I think you're saying like when I said 3, 4, and 5 have a lot of similarities, they're just for different scales
So
of
they
the
might
right.
be,
So
Helen's
it's
idea
like
was a
Helen
couple
said.
of
Right, that would
umbrellas.
be one chunk.
Yep.
That's what I think.
And 1 and 2 are transportation related. Like
Right.
there's a few logical ones. Yep.
And have headings and,
Mhm.
I don't know, numbers. I don't know if you want to have transportation 1 and 2 or.
Yeah, we
however
could
you
do
wanna
that.
Do it, but in those groups, like you explained to us, I think.
Would it be a lot to ask for each of these buckets to reference the clauses or articles that are covered by that?
I think it
Some
would,
of them it'll be easy, but some I think could be very difficult.
I think some of, I'll say for all of them except for 10, we would be able to reasonably straightforwardly identify the core things. Where it gets trickier is when you get out into the tendrils of like, oh, we had to change this one word in site plan or something because of a change that we made in this other section because of this other section, like.
No,
So I
but
think the highlight sections,
Yeah.
like, the big things in, number 3 are sections this, and this. I think we can do that. To list every single thing that was touched because of number 3, it gets,
Yeah, 'cause
sort of,
And
somebody's
Michael,
gonna ask you,
it gets out of control.
somebody's gonna ask you, where,
Um,
where can I find that in
Right.
the?
so Michael, when we did the last time that there was a really big set back in 2022, we did something similar.
Yep.
And what we did was, these are the bulk of the amendments, the heart of it are found in the following articles or sections.
Yeah.
And then it said below it, and minor connections may be found elsewhere. So it was a roadmap for 95% of where that is, knowing that from a legal perspective, there may be a couple of spots where there had to be a cross-reference or something.
95% is good enough.
I think it might be cool to have it color coded. And so you have the 10 buckets and then you have the, all the LDRs and the, transportation ones are, I don't know, blue. And so highlighted in the,
In the
Um,
text.
in the text are the main blue topics. Which, so I
But
mean,
they still don't know the number.
pardon me?
They wouldn't know the number. Where to
Yeah,
go.
but you could cruise through and find blue versus,
500, I don't know, how many pages is it?
It's not actually that many, but
About 300.
The 500 is the
feels-
packet with the doubled up, having
Yes.
it in there twice or
I don't
two and
know,
a half
maybe
times.
some
Yeah.
way to easily get people to connect that.
Right.
Cause they're not gonna necessarily be really familiar with the table of contents of the LDR proposals. So a way to highlight something or, I don't know, it's just a thought, it may be
Mhm.
an enormous amount of work and not worth it.
I think it's a similar thing with the bigger, the core things, like the
Yes.
big chunk is here and here, doable. Everywhere that a word was changed
Oh,
to like
I
relate
wouldn't
to
e-
it, not
I wouldn't even
doable.
go down that route,
Yeah.
cause,
Yep.
those people come to our meetings every week.
Do we have any other business? Okay, we can adjourn.
Okay.
Just a scheduling thing when we're talking about July 30th for the public hearing, June 25th for the public materials, publishing in the other paper on, where did we have that? The 3rd?
the third.
It would be published in the other paper on July 3rd. If you all could take a look at your calendars and figure out when you would be available in those subsequent weeks in July. So the weeks starting the 8th, 15th, and 22nd primarily, when we've talked about having other public sessions of some kind for additional outreach purposes. It would be great to know who from the planning commission would be available on what kinds of days in that. So if you can get a chance to look at when you're available, I just wanted to put that.
And as you've done in the past, the idea was to do a few different times, but you wouldn't necessarily all need to be there. This
Right.
is really staff or a commissioner would
Right.
give a little overview, listen to the public, have 1 or 2 or 3 of you there to take it in. We'll take notes and share the notes
with
for
everybody.
everybody so that everybody's hearing the feedback. But it's nice for members of the community to see that some of their commissioners are there in addition to staff.
Yeah, very similar thing happened last July, actually, for the city plan.
Right,
Two
right.
or three planning commissioners, a couple of weekday, middays, maybe a Saturday, something like that. That's,
Want us to email you the times or do you want to know?
I'll
right
send
now?
I'll send you all an email out,
Okay,
and you guys,
okay.
and you can respond. Just wanted to flag for you to like if you've got floating commitments to figure out when those might be and let me know.
Bryn?
So just one thing, do you think that the public outreach would be couple sessions more focused on homeowners as opposed to maybe developers?
I think it's just the idea that I've at least been thinking is that it would just be generally open to questions. It wouldn't necessarily be structured to be on any particular topic or for any particular audience. With the understanding that because we can't offer these, every day for 3 weeks, there are going to be days that people can make and not make. And I would be, I wouldn't want someone the only one that they are able to make is the one that we've said is geared towards developers or is geared towards homeowners or renters or retired people or younger people or whatever, however we cut that up. I wouldn't want someone to feel unwelcome in the ones that they could make based on time.
That said, Fran, if you have any thoughts on a time that might be most accessible that we don't typically meet to reach residents, that's what Kelsey mentioned, the Saturday. What's a good time to reach some diverse audiences? The development community would be thrilled with a 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. And maybe that's a good reason to have one, in the middle of the day and the middle of the week. But if you have thoughts on when's a good time to get other residents, maybe it's at 5 p.m. right after work, but before they go home, maybe it's on a weekend. Feel free to, let Kelsey know over the next 2 or 3 days if you've got any thoughts on this. We'd love for everybody to feel that they had a chance to weigh in on this.
Yeah, we did it on Saturday morning, I think 10 o'clock, we did a couple.
We did one on Saturday at 10 or 11. And then we did 2 different ones
Yeah,
at lunchtime.
Lunchtime, yeah.
One was a Thursday and one was a Tuesday or something like that, for the city plan. Yeah.
About how many meetings are you thinking?
I mean, 2 or 3 seems good. It's there's about 3 weeks that we would have. And the assumption is that people would need time to kind of read the things, and given the Independence Day holiday, 2
Plus
or
your public hearing
plus
formally.
the formal public hearing is on July 30th. So
Okay.
2 or
That sounds
3
good.
in those dates. And as Paul said, it would be great if each of you could come to one. You don't need to be planning to be at all 2 or 3 or whatever it ends up being.
I'd like to be at all of them, but this is probably the most impossible time I'm gone for 2 of those weeks out of the country. And then my work schedule is getting crazy before and after. So this would definitely be a time where I'd super appreciate if everybody could participate, because I may not be able to participate at the level I would typically like to, just with the timing.
I think it's exciting that the US Supreme Court will be reading our work.
I don't know. The judge.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled.
I think there was a motion on the table too.
Oh yeah, I adjourned.
So
Oh,
moved.
It's
we
not even a
adjourned
motion.
long before all of that.
The clerks will read it.